Hello, and welcome to another lesson from Level Up Mathematics. In today's lesson, we will be exploring rates and unit rates. Before we look at an example, let's start with some definitions. Let's talk about rate first. A rate is a ratio that describes the comparison by division of two different quantities. So, for example, we have two ratios here comparing two different quantities. So in our first example, we have 120 miles being compared to 2 gallons. So our different units, miles are the units for the numerator, gallons are the units for the denominator. So that's a rate. You're comparing two different quantities using division. In our second example, we have dollars compared to hours. So we're using division to compare two different units. Now, a unit rate is a special rate which describes the amount per one or the rate when the denominator is 1. So, for example, 120 miles for 2 gallons is the same thing as 60 miles per 1 gallon. Or we could just say 60 miles per gallon. $210 for 3 hours is the same thing as $70 for 1 hour, or $70 per hour. So that's a unit rate. A unit rate would be after you perform the division. All right, let's look at an example of this. For dinner, there are 10 slices of pizza for 4 kids. Express the ratio of slices to kids and write this ratio as a number in 4 different ways. So let's start with the unreduced fraction. That would be 10 slices for 4 kids. Now, we could write that in reduced form because 10 over 4 would reduce to 5 over 2. So we could say there are 5 slices for every 2 kids. Again, notice that it is a rate because we have different units, slices and kids. Now, 5 over 2 can be written as a mixed number if we write it as 2.5. And we can write 5 over 2 as a decimal by writing it as 2.5. So in part B, it says, use appropriate units, explain what the number you found in part A represents. Well, this 2.5, this 2.5, what that literally means is there are 2.5 slices for each individual kid. That's the amount of pizza that one kid can get, 2.5 slices per kid. So if there were 10 kids and the ratio of pizza slices to kids stayed the same, how many slices would be needed? So if we're doing 2.5 slices per one kid, and we want to multiply that by 10 kids, put that over 1, make it a fraction 2, we can eliminate or cross-cancel the kids because they're the same on the diagonal. It's supposed to be right. And what's left is 2.5 slices times 10, which would be 25 slices. So for 10 kids, you're going to need 25 slices, or 2.5 times 10. All right, example 2. Complete the table using the given information. In a cage containing only spiders, the ratio of legs to spiders is 56 to 7. So if I just write this as a ratio, I don't need any units. It would just be 56 to 7. Or you could write it with a colon. It doesn't matter. Either one of those is correct. It's a ratio. Now, if they want you to write it as a rate, then you need units. So it would be 56 legs to 7 spiders. Remember, a rate is a special ratio that compares two different units. Here, our units are legs and spiders. Now, the unit rate is the rate you get when you divide. So 56 divided by 7 would be 8 legs per spider. All right. At a snack stand, Caden paid $6.75 for 3 pretzels. So to write it as a ratio, it would just be 6.75 over 3. We don't need units for ratios. All right. Now for the rate, I would want to include the units. $6.75 for 3 pretzels. And then the unit rate would be after the division. So 6.75 divided by 3 would be $2.25 per pretzel. All right. A babysitter gets paid $60 for 4 hours a week. What I'd like you to do is pause the video, try this problem on your own, then press play when you're finished to come back and check your answers. All right, welcome back. Let's see how you did. For the ratio, I put 60 over 4, or if you put this 60 colon 4, either one is correct. All right. For the rate, I did $60 for 4 hours. To get the unit rate, I divided 60 divided by 4 and got $15 per 1 hour, or $15 per hour. All right, if you need to pause and correct anything that you got wrong, do so now. If you got that all correct, then let's go on to our next example. Example 3. Sarah paid $56.25 for 15 gallons of gasoline. Express this situation as a rate comparing the total cost to the number of gallons. So we'll say 56.25. Our units is dollars compared to 15, and our units is gallons. And I'm just going to abbreviate that. All right. Now, I want to take this ratio from part A and express it as a unit rate. So to do that, we're going to have to do a little bit of division here. I want to know how many times will 15 go into 56.25. So 15 will go into 56 3 times. Put the decimal there. That would be 45. Subtract and bring down. Let's see, 15 would go into 112 7 times. 7 times 15, that'd be 70, and 35 would be 105. Let's see, subtract and bring down. And 15 would go into 75 5 times. So our unit rate is going to be $3.75 per 1 gallon. Again, when it says give appropriate units, this is what they mean. I have my dollar symbol and then per whatever. In this case, it was per gallon. All right. At this rate, how much would 5 gallons of gas cost? So our rate that we're using is $3.75 for 1 gallon. And I want to multiply that by 5 gallons. And I'll put that over a 1. So remember, from learning to multiply by fractions, we can cross cancel on the diagonal. So the gallons would cancel out, and I'd be left with 3.75 times 5. So let me come over here and do that math. 3.75 times 5. Let's see, 5 times 5 is 25. Carry the 2, 37. Carry the 3, 15, 16, 18. I have 2 numbers after the decimal, so I want to move my decimal in 2 places. So that would be $18.75. All right, example 4. A recipe calls for 2 cups of salt for every 8 cups of water. Express this situation as a rate comparing the amount of salt needed to the amount of water needed. So we have 2 cups of salt compared to 8 cups water. So that's our rate. Now the unit rate is after division. So 2 divided by 8, I could divide both those by 2 and get 1/4. So our unit rate would be 1/4 cup of salt per 1 cup of water. So that's what it means by including your appropriate units. All right, 1/4 cup of salt per 1 cup of water. So at this rate, how much salt would be needed for 36 cups of water? So I'm taking 1/4 cup salt for 1 cup water, and I'm going to multiply that by 36 cups of water. And again, I'm going to make it in a fraction. So the water will cancel with the water, and then I'm just left with, on the numerator, 1/4 times 36. So 1/4 times 36 is the same thing as 36 divided by 4, which is 9. So I would need 9 cups of salt for 36 cups of water. Kara is making costumes for a play her middle school is performing. She buys 4 yards of fabric for $18. A, what is the unit price? So I want to take our total amount, $18, and divide it by 4 yards to get my unit price. So I'll have to do a little division over here to see how many times 4 goes into 18. So 4 goes into 18 4 times. 4 times 4 is 16. Subtract and bring down. 4 goes into 20 5 times. Put your decimal. Now, it doesn't make any sense to say $4.5 per yard, because when we deal with dollars and cents, we need to make sure there's 2 numbers after the decimal. So when I add that, this would be $4.50 per yard. $4.50 per yard. So if Kara buys 7 additional yards of fabric at the same cost, how much will she spend? So let me write my unit rate. It was $4.50 for 1 yard. And I'm going to multiply that times 7 yards over 1. The yards will cancel out and leave me 4.50 times 7. So this would be 0, 35, carry the 3. 7 times 4 is 28, 29, 30, 31. Move my decimal in 2 places. So the total cost for 7 yards would be $31.50. And that concludes today's lesson, Introduction to Rates and Unit Rates.